Good evening, and welcome back to your adventure. I, of course, am Jack, aka Count Von Count, your narrator, storyteller, and guide through the lands of Kjlovania. I hope you're ready and excited to jump right back in where we left off last week. This, of course, is the Seven Masks of Malice.
Withermarsh shrank behind them like a bad memory as the group trudged into the forest outside the city. Smoke from the burned chapel still smeared the sky, a black finger pointing nowhere. The graves behind the hollow hearth had not yet settled. Elias and Merrick lay under damp soil while the town exhaled in uneven, frightened breaths. The company turned their backs on it all and walked. The road to Braxia was not really a road at all at first, just two muddy grooves cutting east, worn by carts that had either made the trip or vanished trying. The marsh slowly loosened its grip, trading sucking bog for firmer ground. No one spoke for a while. Boots thudded, armor clicked. Benny padded alongside Cassian, tongue out, occasionally bumping his leg to make sure he was still there. Jackson was the first to crack. He always was. "So," he said lightly, "on a scale of 1 to we're absolutely doomed, where would you say we currently are?" "Walk," Juno said. "Is that a number?" Jackson asked. "Today it is," she replied. The land rolled upward by slow degrees. The air lost the sweet rot of the marsh, taking on a cleaner chill that hinted at the mountains ahead. A thin river kept them company to their right, dark and fast, carrying bits of broken reed and the occasional half-drowned branch towards some unseen sea. The routine of travel settled in. Juno and Saberic naturally at the front, their pace steady, the shape of soldiers who had done this more times than they cared to count. Gabriel drifted somewhere in the middle, his gaze split between the road and something no one else could see. Dorian walked with measured steps, counting distances, cataloging landmarks, with the absent focus of a mind that never stopped measuring. Leaf stayed to the side wherever there was cover to be had, half on the road and half in the brush, like he distrusted open space the way others distrusted locked doors. Dion carried the silence for about an hour before it got too heavy for him. "Dion not like quiet this long," he announced. "Quiet makes thoughts loud." "What, are your thoughts too buff for your skull?" Leaf said. "Yes," Dion replied cheerfully. "Hurts sometimes." Gabriel gave a small breath of a laugh. "Then let's make them someone else's problem. We should talk. We won't have this kind of privacy in Braxia." "Assuming we have much of anything in Braxia," Cassian muttered. He'd been quieter than usual. The sight of Elias's body had carved something deep in him, a shape that hadn't decided what it was yet. Grief, anger, maybe guilt. "Then start there," Jackson said, looking at him. "You've been brooding harder than usual, and frankly, that's impressive. What dragged our favorite reluctant half-vampire out to a swamp on the edge of nowhere in the first place?" Cassian's eyes stayed on the road for a long beat. "Fine," he said. "We have nothing better to do anyways." "Right before I got Elias's letter, I'd just put down a nest of thralls," he began. "Chapel outside of New Tristan, once a meeting place of our friends in red robes, but more recently a home for something more undead." The others quieted, letting the story carve itself out. "They desecrated the altar," Cassian continued, "turned it into a feeding trough. Same stone, new purpose. Ironic if you've still got a sense of humor about gods." "You don't," Gabriel said softly. "Not particularly, no." Cassian's mouth curled. "Anyways, I cleaned it out, stakes, fire, the usual. Afterwards, I went back to the city. Mud, blood, ash. I was tired enough to sleep on my feet." He lifted his hand as if seeing the letter again. There it was, a piece of paper waiting on my table like it had every right to be there. Captain Elias Vane. Never heard of him. Talk of rot in Withermarsh, caravans vanishing, innocent blood spilled, evil rising, all of that noble nonsense. "And that moved you?" Juno asked. Cassian shrugged. "Once upon a time, that kind of thing would have had me in the saddle before the ink dried, but that was before the church tried to kill me for doing the job they trained me for, before I crawled out of a pit with a hunger I never asked for." He exhaled through his nose. "I almost burned the letter, really, held it over the candle, watched the edge brown. But he mentioned coin, and if I want to keep tracking the Crimson Sun's real leadership, I need coin. Bribes, travel, silver, bolts, steel, all of that adds up." "You thought it was a job," Saberic said. I told myself it was, Cassian replied, but there was something else in there. Not the words themselves, the way he wrote them. A turn of phrase, a weight behind the lines. Like someone who wasn't just afraid of monsters, but someone who'd fought them. Someone who'd lost to them. He paused, pushing hair back from his face as the wind caught it. My gut twisted when I read it, so I packed my things. There was a silence that wasn't quite judgment and wasn't quite admiration. And before that, Gabriel asked gently, before the letters and the hunts and the crimson sun. Cassian's eyes went somewhere else entirely. Before that, I remember my family. Seems like an age ago, and I guess it was. There was a hill behind the Valemont estate, he said. Not steep, just high enough you could see the whole valley. Copper fields, vineyards, the chapel spire catching the sun like it was pretending to still matter. He smiled briefly, small and fragile. I was maybe 7. My sister Elira, older than me by a few years, she dragged me up there one autumn morning. She brought plum bread, sat down, broke it in half, handed me a piece and said, "Look." He lifted his head as if the hill might be somewhere ahead if he squinted hard enough. No priests, no tutors, no expectations, just wind and warmth and the feeling that the world could be big without being cruel. Juno looked at him sidelong. "What happened to her?" she asked. "I don't know," Cassian said. No hesitation, just a blunt edge. "I was a teenager when it happened. We were attacked one evening, creatures of the night. Our house burned and defiled, everyone scattered. Our parents, Elira, just gone, missing in the smoke. I vowed to get revenge on the creatures that took my family that night, and the Church of the Crimson Sun took me in. A young and ambitious deacon named Corvinus was recruiting young soldiers to become justiciars. Unfortunately, my rage was blinding, and the church took advantage, and then threw me away the moment I was no longer needed." "Damn, that sucks," Jackson said bluntly. Juno glared at him. "What? It does," Jackson retorted sheepishly. "We're glad you're on the right side of this now, Cassian," Juno said softly. The road swallowed that sentence and carried it away. They walked until the sun had climbed high enough to make armor uncomfortable and cloaks optional. They stopped at a bend in the road where a lone willow leaned over a stream, its branches trailing lazily across the water's surface like fingers drawing secrets in the current. Benny flopped down in the dirt dramatically. The group settled in for a short rest. Dion wandered. He always wandered. Big frame, big steps, big curiosity. He drifted towards an old corkboard nailed crookedly to a roadside post, half rotted and fluttering with weather-beaten notices. Most were sun-bleached beyond recognition, but one fresh parchment caught his eye. Crisp edges, expensive paper, ink that shimmered faintly like spilled moonlight. Dion peeled it free. His eyebrows rose so high they nearly fled into his hairline. The parchment was lavishly decorated, swirls of silver ink, embossed lettering, a wax seal stamped with the symbol of a lute crossed over a crescent moon. He cleared his throat and read under his breath. Braxia's Bards and Ballads Night, March 16th, at the Crescendo Court in Braxia. A grand evening celebrating the finest musical talents across the land. Perform before Braxia's elite, from noble houses to patrons of the arts. Substantial prizes and the chance for renown, contracts, and patronage await those bold enough to take the stage. Come sing, play, and weave your legend beneath the ashen moon. Grand prize, 1,500 gold. Second prize, 750 gold. And third prize, 250 gold. Glory before the courts of Braxia. Contracts for houses with the sharpest ears and deepest pockets. Entry fee, 100 silver pieces. No gods, no curses, no blood magic. Only true art shall prevail. Dion stared, then read it again, and again, each repetition widening the grin across his face. He turned to the others, holding the parchment aloft like he'd just pulled a legendary sword from a stone. "Dion, find something," he announced. Cassian looked over without lifting his head fully. "If it's another recipe for mushroom stew, we're burning it." Dion shook the paper. "No, better. Big show, big stage, big money. Bards and ballads in Braxia. Judges, crowds, nobles throwing flowers, maybe underwear, maybe coins. Dion made for this." Jackson perked up immediately, ears practically twitching. "Let me see that," he said, already stepping forward. Dion pulled it back. No, Dion see first." Jackson narrowed his eyes. Why would you enter a bardic competition? Dion thumped a fist on his chest. Thunk, like knocking on a temple door. Because Dion have music in soul. Deep, loud, mighty. Jackson furrowed his brow. Maybe you should let a real musician enter? Cassian laughed. I'm sure you both have a real good shot at winning. Juno looked up from cleaning her weapon, expression unreadable. If you want to play music, Dion, do it. Don't let these goons stop you. Dion looked like his heart might explode right there. He folded the flyer with almost reverent care, slipped it into his belt pouch, and walked back towards the fire, wearing a smile so bright it could have lit the entire road to Braxia. Gabriel regarded Juno across the circle and turned the conversation towards something more somber. You mentioned redemption once, he said, back at the Hollow Hearth. When Madame Vieira spoke of the Shield of Dawn, you said it belonged to Kjlovania, not to you. Juno stared at the horizon for a long moment before answering. Redemption is irrelevant to me, she said finally. Mine, anyway. No one interrupted. I had my chance, she went on. More than one, and I wasted every single one of them being obedient, being loyal, and being exactly what men like Glavius needed me to be. Until I broke. Her jaw tensed. Whatever clean slate I might have had burned when I chose to pick up that hammer for myself, not for them. Dion frowned. Juno not bad, he said. Juno strong. Strong good. You don't know what I've done, she said quietly. Don't care, Dion shrugged. Dion do bad things too. Smash wrong skulls, break wrong bones. You smash right ones now. That's what matter. Juno let out a breath that might have been a humorous laugh. I'm not here for my soul, she said. I'm here for Kjlovania's. If we can bring down even a part of this festering patriarchy, rip out a few roots of the corruption, give people room to breathe without asking permission, then maybe that's enough. She glanced down the road toward where Braxia waited unseen. Everyone deserves a life free of abuse, to live with the ones they love, to choose their own destiny. That's redemption enough for me. Gabriel watched her for a moment and then nodded. That, he said softly, is older and holier than anything the Crimson Sun ever preached. After they'd walked off the stiffness of the break, Dion drifted up beside Juno, his hammer slung casually over one shoulder. Benny trotted between them like a chaperone. Dion have plan, he announced. Good for Dion, Juno said. What unfortunate structure will it fall on? Not structure, he said. Heart. Specifically yours. She gave him a side-eye that could have made metal rust. Wrong answer, she said. He persisted anyway. When we get to Braxia, Dion said, enter talent show. Big crowd. Music. Noise. People cheering. Dion show off skill and win content and win Juno's heart. Jackson maybe cry because Dion better. I already hate this, Jackson called from behind. Dion thumped his chest again. Dion not do it for gold, he said. Dion do it for feelings. Juno not like big showy things. Juno like deep things, like onion. Many layers. Please stop calling me an onion, Juno said. Dion got layers too, he went on, undeterred. Somewhere, under muscles, under yelling, in Braxia, Dion plays song about big love, big missing, big wanting someone who wild like wolf and won't let Dion catch her easy. Not clean, not fancy, but real. Judges not see coming. Crowd not see coming. Maybe, he tapped his chest, Juno feel it. Right in ribs. For a second, the corner of her mouth betrayed her. You think you can sneak past my armor with an accordion? She asked. Yes, Dion said simply. She huffed. We'll see. Behind them, Jackson twirled a twig between his fingers as he walked, pretending it was a baton. So while the church was busy arguing with itself and pretending to be holy, he said, where were all the grand, shining nobles in their embroidered shirts? You know, the great houses. I thought they were supposed to keep things like Xavier from happening. Dorian glanced up from the journal he'd been leafing through. They tried, he said. Some of them, anyway. The story depends on who's telling it, of course, but the version I heard in the cloisters went something like this. Start with House Valchester, Dorian went on. Oldest of the four, St. Tristan's Keep was theirs long before the church crowned it holy. Tall spires, libraries bigger than villages, gardens that could feed half a province. They were scholars more than soldiers, diplomats, patrons of anyone with a quill or a clever idea. Gabriel nodded slowly. The Conclave of Minds, every 10 years. I read about those. They dragged philosophers, artificers, mages, and lunatics into one room and tried to solve the world in a week. Sounds awful, Leaf muttered. All those opinions in one place? Dorian paused before continuing, looking at Leaf. They believed knowledge is what held the kingdom together. House Valchester funded schools, maps, expeditions. Half of the monster hunting manuals I grew up with were written on parchment they paid for. When the Crimson Sun was still young, in St. Hovel's days, House Valchester and the church were partners. Faith handled souls, Valchester handled the minds. And later, when Xavier came knocking, Jackson asked. Well, they saw it first, Dorian said. Or so the story goes. Undead sightings rising, caravans going dark in valleys, nobles found bled dry in locked rooms. Valchester tried to rally the other houses, warn the church. Bishop Aaron Mulvane called them alarmists, heretics in some versions. Juno scoffed. Of course he did. Easy thing to call people liars when the truth makes you look foolish. Dorian nodded. They pushed back anyway. Valchester tried to hold St. Tristan's Keep when Xavier finally bared his teeth. The siege lasted weeks, months, some say. Sir Henrik Valchester held the walls. Lady Maribel begged allies from every corner, and Lord Alistair tried to keep the city's people from tearing each other apart in panic. And then? Dion asked, intrigued by the mention of battle. Dorian gestured out into the forest. Then came the night of the eclipse. Holy wards failed. Xavier walked right through the gates dressed like one of their own, red-robed and bearing the Crimson Sun's mark as an irony. By the time the sun rose, the keep was a slaughterhouse. Lord Alistair was dead, archives were burned or stolen, and what was left of House Valchester was dragged into exile and blamed for not stopping the thing no one would admit existed. History written by the victors, Jackson said lightly, or whoever's left holding the pen. Juno stared toward the east where the road curled, her jaw tight. So the brain of the kingdom was torn out. What about the heart? That would be House Eldenwise, Gabriel said. Elven nobility in Valoran before the church ever moved in. They built the city to breathe with a forest. Trees grown into towers, rivers guided through the streets, wards woven into the roots instead of stone. Cassian's gaze lifted at that, remembering. Valoran is truly beautiful. It's no wonder the church made it their mecca. All golden domes and righteous light, the whole city basically looks like a chapel. Dorian snorted softly. That's the church's version of the city. Eldenwise Valoran was quieter. Art, seasonal festivals, the Sylvan Academy, teaching magic, herbalism, history, and not just to elves, humans, dwarves, anyone willing to listen and not set the trees on fire. They had councils too, seats for commoners. The church did not like that. Well, at first it did, Gabriel said. In Havel's age, light and learning walking hand in hand, but when Mulvane turned faith into a weapon, elves became suspicious. Too different, too powerful, too unwilling to burn everything on command. Leaf popped out of a shadow near the path. So the church sharpened the blade on them? More subtle at first, Gabriel replied. Rumors that Eldenwise harbored dark spirits, that their magic blurred the line between life and death. Convenient when Xavier's corruption started rotting the land. Humans needed someone to blame. The church pointed at the forest. Let me guess, Juno said. When war came, the elves still fought anyway, didn't they? They did, Dorian replied. Queen Ilariel is said to have held a warded line in the woods for 3 nights straight, keeping Xavier's creatures from spilling south. But fear spreads faster than gratitude. When the first war turned ugly and the land turned on them, House Eldenwise withdrew, sealing Valoran's old paths, many of them just vanishing north into Norora and other hidden enclaves. To most people now, they're a myth, folk tales and half-remembered songs. Dion hummed thoughtfully. Dion think elves smart. When humans start pointing, better to go where fingers too short to reach. Jackson stretched, his legs weary from walking. So the scholars and tree huggers were broken. What about the people with actual swords? House Drummold and House Morningstar, Dorian answered. The Drumolds were north, the Hollow Pass Mountains, frozen lakes, forests full of teeth. They were the border wardens. They were grim, impractical. They made peace with the Lycans more than they fought with them. Gabriel nodded. Treaty of the Fang. I read a redacted copy once. Terms were surprisingly reasonable. Trust a warlock to enjoy a contract, Jackson murmured. Gabriel smirked. The Drumholds formed the Border Watch Alliance. Various lesser houses bound to keep the north from spilling south in a wave of claws and snow, and for a while, it worked. Harvest festivals up there even had humans and Lycans feasting together. Uneasy, but real. Leaf wrinkled his nose. Sharing a table with something that might eat you in a bad mood sounds terrible. Better than hunting them until they have no reason not to, Juno said. Dorian's voice lowered. Xavier didn't have to lift a finger to destroy Drumhold. He just had to twist what was already fragile. Mulvane in his book of brands had primed the world to fear anything that didn't fit the human shape. Rumors started. Drumhold turning, sleeping with the enemy, worshipping beasts. A rogue pack attacks a village. Xavier's agents make sure the blame lands on the castle. Then comes the purge. Righteous armies march north. Drumhold Castle falls. The family is killed or cursed into the very creatures they once kept in check. Cassian shifted, shoulders tight. So the people who actually knew how to live with monsters were the first ones burned for it. Exactly, Dorian said softly. From then on, every lichen problem was solved with fire and steel instead of treaties. Easier to control frightened peasants than thoughtful ones. And that leaves one, Severick said gruffly. House Morningstar. Dorian nodded. Monster hunters, he said. From the east, near the coast. The Nightfall Keep. Vaults full of relics and curses bottled in glass. If something crawled out of a grave or howled at the moon wrong, chances are a Morningstar had a method for putting it back in the ground. Church must have loved them in the beginning, Juno thought out loud. They did, Gabriel replied. When Havel's doctrine still held, Morningstar worked with early clergy and hedge mages to keep the worst of the dark at bay. The night of the hunt was practically a holiday, hunters showing off trophies, trading techniques, sharing what they'd learned about abominations so others could survive the next time. Sounds almost noble, Jackson said, making the word sound like a joke and a compliment at once. It was, Dorian said, until Xavier. He didn't just evade their methods, he rewrote the rules. His blood magic, his cults, his ability to twist the dead and the living both. It slipped through all the tactics Morningstar had perfected. Worse, he got inside their walls, turned allies, bribed servants, corrupted one of their own. The betrayal gutted them, he continued. Nightfall Keep ambushed from within, hunters slaughtered in their own halls. Those who survived went into hiding, changed names, redacted their lore, scattered their line. The church, under Mulvane's paranoid heel, happily branded them an example. See what happens when you play too close to darkness? Hypocrites, Juno muttered. The church fails to stop Xavier and then blames the people who actually tried. Mulvane needed scapegoats, Dorian continued. House Morningstar was perfect, skilled in forbidden lore, used blood wards and things the average villager didn't even understand. It was easier to call them tainted than admit the church had ignored warnings about Xavier for years. So, Jackson said lightly, 4 great pillars, one exiled, one vanished into the woods, one cursed and torn apart, and the other shattered from the inside. And in the ruins, we get Xavier's short, charming reign and a church that collapses in a single night. And then, Dorian added, we get Haldoran, Reformation, the church pretending to remember what mercy is, temporarily. Juno glanced his way. You sound unconvinced. I think Haldoran meant every word, Dorian said. Flame must serve, not rule. Temples as hospitals, admitting Xavier as a real threat instead of a myth. Good principles, but principles need heirs, and the church's track record with those is poor. Leaf kicked a stone into the woods, and now we have Glavius, who is a fat liar who preys on the fear of his people. Glavius believes Xavier is divine retribution, Severick said quietly. I heard whispers in Voxborough before I left. New hymns with old words twisted slightly, sun sigils that look more like fangs. Confession used as leverage instead of absolution. Cardinal Crow started that rot. Glavius just stopped pretending it was an accident. And the blood moon, Juno added. End of this month. Every cultist, zealot, and monster with a calendar is circling it in red. Silence settled again, heavier this time. The road to Braxia lay ahead still as they paused to rest for the evening, a dark curve aiming straight toward the city that awaited them. They found a dry spot in a clearing just off the path and settled in, each finding a space to sit or lean. Gabriel gathered some dry kindling and started a small fire with a snap of his fingers. Theon chuckled under his breath, then leaned back, folding his hands behind his head to stare at the cloud-muted stars. Redemption, he said out of nowhere. Big word for such small fire. Juno arched an eyebrow. You planning on defining it for us, philosopher? Dion? He laughed. No. Dion just listen. He tapped his chest lightly. You talk about fixing Kjlovania, church, houses, Xavier. Big things. but Dion think maybe best redemption is smaller. Maybe one person looking at you different than before. God, Leaf groaned. He's self-aware. We're doomed. Juno looked away, a faint color warming her cheeks in the firelight. You'd get more points if you stopped narrating your own romantic strategy like a drunk bard. Dion grinned. Dion terrible with words. Better with squeezebox. That, Jackson said dryly, is purely subjective, but I admire your commitment. The laughter that followed was soft, exhausted, but real. It lingered as the night deepened, and the tiredness in their bones finally forced them towards bedrolls. The laughter around the campfire thinned into tired smiles. The road, the dead, the blood moon, it all waited patiently just beyond the ring of light. Dorian extinguished his arcane sigils with a slow exhale, the faint light along his gauntlet dimming into a dull, sleeping metal. Gabriel traced a lazy ward in the dirt with the toe of his boot, more habit than necessity, and lay back, staring up at the cloud-choked sky. Juno took first watch without commenting on it, leaning on her hammer like it was just another part of her armor. Benny circled twice and then dropped down next to Cassian with a heavy sigh, his head resting on his master's boots. Jackson tuned his fiddle down half a step, plucked a soft, minor phrase that almost became a song, then let it die midway. Even he had his limits. Night folded over them, crickets creaked in the grass. Somewhere far off, an owl called once, and then thought better of it. Sleep came grudgingly, but it came. Morning dragged itself across the sky in smudged shades of blue and ash. The air was colder, the wind sharper, carrying with it a faint metallic scent from the east that could only belong to too many chimneys and too much stone. Braxia was getting closer. They broke camp in practiced silence. Beds rolled, straps cinched, armor rebuckled. Dorian handed out a few of Silka's smaller tinctures with the reverence of a quartermaster rationing miracles. Gabriel flexed his bitten arm and, satisfied the serpent's venom wasn't lingering, pulled his cloak tighter. Just another day, Dorian said, glancing up the road as if measuring distance against the angle of the sun. If we push. Let's not arrive half dead and bleeding, Juno said. We've already made that entrance once. True, Jackson said, and I do like to keep my dramatic reveals varied. They set out, boots chewing through the soft earth. The landscape had shifted. Less swamp, more ragged fields and stone fences, the ghosts of abandoned farmsteads slowly being retaken by weeds. For a while, they simply walked. Eventually, Gabriel moved to the front and turned towards the group, walking backwards in front of them. We should talk about Braxia, he said, before the city has opinions about us first. Agreed, Dorian said. We have threads, we need a tapestry. Stupid metaphor, Leaf muttered, but fine. Cassian tugged Benny's collar gently to keep him from wandering off the road. All right then, let's start simple. What's our priority list? Survive, Leaf said. Not die loudly, Jackson added. Dorian sighed. After those. Fine, Jackson held up his fingers, counting. 1, get to the Silver Wolf house and secure it as a base. 2, figure out how to approach Lord Adrian without being arrested. 3, follow the Sylvanas trail. Ledger contacts, missing caravans, everyone playing courier for our favorite dead sorcerer. And 4, avoid the church's leash while we do any of that. Don't forget 5, Gabriel said. Find out what the plan for the blood moon is. Juno nodded. So, subtle. We are not good at subtle, but we can pretend. Dion frowned. Dion can be subtle. See? He tiptoed for 3 steps, all 200 plus pounds of him creaking in leather and steel like a barn falling over. Juno put a hand to her face. We'll workshop it. Cassian's eyes drifted forward toward where the city would eventually be, hidden behind the hills. Silver Wolf Estate first, he said, no matter what. Elias went to the trouble of setting it up. There might be supplies, contacts, or traps, I guess, if someone got there first. Lovely, Jackson said. Nothing says, welcome home, like mystery traps. I'll feel better once I can see the wards, Dorian said. Old mercenary houses usually have interesting defenses. Leaf stuffed his hands deeper into his cloak pockets. Elias said it's under the southern ridge of the upper tier, near Adrian's castle. Do you have any idea how hard it is to look like you belong in the upper tier? They throw people out for scuffing the cobblestones. You've been there? Gabriel asked. Leaf hesitated just long enough to make the answer pointless. Once or twice. Of course, Juno muttered. Cassian considered that. Then you can guide us through the city tiers, quiet routes, who to avoid, where the watch actually watches. Maybe, Leaf said, if I don't run into anyone who remembers me or whatever. Reassuring, Jackson said. Gabriel cleared his throat. What about Adrian himself? Elias warned us that he weighs the scales in his favor, and that's the generous version. Lord Adrian is, he searched for a word, then gave up. Practical, cold, old in all the ways that matter. He doesn't play at nobility, he wears it like armor. He keeps his promises, but the promises are always phrased carefully enough that you only realize the missing parts after the ink dries. He is known for his neutrality to a fault. So then do we tell him everything? Dorian asked. Xavier, Glavius, Blood Moon visions, the ledger, Sylvanas' name. Once he has that information, we don't get it back. Gabriel chewed on that. We need him, I think, or at least his resources. Braxia is his city. Trying to unravel church cults and vampire rituals there without someone like Adrian is like trying to rebuild St. Tristan's Keep with a spoon. What if we make it transactional? Juno asked. We walk in with something he wants. The ledger. Proof of Sylvanas meddling with his city. Offer him a piece of the truth in exchange for safe passage and information. Right, Jackson said. What could go wrong? We're doing that, or we're guessing, Juno shot back. I'm tired of guessing. I want someone who knows the rules of that city, even if those rules are broken. Gabriel nodded slowly. We don't have to tell him about the blood moon, or the visions, or every detail of Xavier's stirrings. Not yet. We can let him think we're just very competent mercenaries doing what mercenaries do, cleaning up messes for coin. Leaf whistled low. Going to be tough to sell just mercenaries when we're dragging a naked barbarian, a fey-touched warlock, an almost paladin, a very paladin, maybe not former cult curiosity, and a dog too friendly to exist. Benny is an asset, Cassian said firmly. He's our public relations. Benny wagged his tail at being mentioned, completely validating the point. Achoo! Leaf sneezed. Dorian lifted one hand. We also can't ignore the ledger leads. The Gilded Lily, the Night Market on the Festival of Masks, the Collector's Gallery. Those are three distinct veins. We pull on the wrong one first and we'll tip our hand. What do you know about them? Gabriel asked. Dorian shrugged. Scraps. The Gilded Lily is an upper-tier lounge, music, wine, quiet deals. The Night Market during the Festival of Mass is exactly as subtle as it sounds, from what I hear. Chaos masquerading as celebration. And the Collector's Gallery? He paused. I've only heard rumors, but it's very exclusive, very private, and very illegal. Sounds like home, Leaf said. Exactly why I'd rather we didn't go there first, Dorian replied. We should stabilize our footing before we start robbing illegal fortresses. Who said anything about robbing? Jackson asked lightly. We might just be retrieving, redistributing, aggressively borrowing. Juno rolled her eyes. We focus. Silverwolf House, then Gilded Lily as our first lead. It's the least public. Less chaos means less chance of the Church's eyes or Xavier cultists stumbling over us on night one. Gabriel nodded. And the Lily uses signals, the silver coin, according to the ledger. We can test the waters, see who bites. And if Adrian's people are already watching those routes, Cassian said. Then they'll notice us, Juno replied, which we need them to do eventually. The road curved around a rocky outcrop, giving them a glimpse of the land ahead. A faint haze on the horizon, darker than fog, hanging low where a city's smoke would be. Braxia's first breath. Gabriel slowed a little, letting the others walk ahead. Juno noticed and matched his pace. The vision, she said quietly. Tell me again. He hesitated. On the road near Braxia, us, dead, arrows, lots of them. I didn't get a clear look at who held the bows. Not reassuring, she said. No, he agreed. But it might be avoidable. Visions aren't fate, they're warnings, possible branches. So we don't walk down the center of the road like idiots, she said. We approach Braxia off the main trade path, cut through the scrub, use cover. Don't arrive at the exact spot you saw. Gabriel nodded. Not a bad idea. And once we're inside, Juno continued, we move in pairs. No one walks the streets alone. We treat every alley like a battlefield and every chapel like a trap, until proven otherwise. You're getting good at this, he said softly. Practice, she answered. Besides, someone has to think about the part where we don't die, while the rest of you are thinking about how to save the world. Up ahead, Dion had drifted closer to Cassian and Leaf, trying to steer the conversation back toward the talent show. You think Braxia have good music fight? He asked. Big stage, many people? Dion play. Jackson play. Whole city cry? City might cry for all kinds of reasons, Leaf said. But yes, those events are loud. If we time things right, we could use it. Use it how? Cassian asked. Noise hides noise, Leaf said. You need to meet someone in secret, you do it when everyone else is shouting. You need to tail someone, you do it in a crowd of 1,000 masks. You need to move stolen crates of suspicious bones? He nodded toward Gabriel. You do it when the guards are too busy breaking up drunken knife fights. Oh, comforting, Cassian said. They walked for the rest of the day until the sun sat low in the sky, ready to give up its crown, shadows leaning eastward. The smell of the city grew clearer. Coal smoke, old stone, river rot, spices, too many bodies in too small of a space. The road had grown busier in fits, an occasional farmer's cart. A pair of traders headed the other way with their cart empty and their eyes wary. At one point, a pilgrim in faded crimson sun colors passed them, staff in hand, eyes downcast. The group shifted instinctively to make space. No one spoke until he was safely beyond earshot. The church in Braxia, Gabriel said at last. Officially, they don't rule it. Unofficially, I'd bet you a year's tithe they've bought shrines under half the streets. Glavius won't want to control Braxia, Juno said. He'll want to infect it, the same way mold treats bread. And Adrian, Dorian added, will let both sides press just hard enough to keep each other busy while he does what he wants. We're walking into a three-way tug of war and pretending to be rope. Ha! Jackson said. I'd like to be a knife instead. Knives cut ropes. Leaf smirked. Knives also disappear if you're not careful. They crested one more low hill, and then they saw it properly. Braxia. The city sprawled across a series of rises and ridges, its lower tiers hugging the river in a crush of warehouses, docks, and haphazard rooftops. Above that, terraces of stone streets climbed the hillside, each tier a little more orderly, a little more heavily walled. Bridges arched between towers, smoke curled from 100 chimneys. The uppermost ridge held a darker silhouette, Adrian's castle, all sharp lines and watching windows, perched like a patient predator overlooking the rest. For a moment, no one spoke. Looks big, Dion said thoughtfully. Accurate, Dorian replied. Cassian exhaled slowly. Remember the plan, he said. We go in as what we are, a mercenary company with a letter from a dead captain, a trail of dead cultists, and very specific questions. We use the Silver Wolf house, we move carefully, we don't split up unless we have to. Priority 1, Juno said. Secure the house. And then we start pulling on threads. Silver Wolf, then Lily, Dorian added. No detours, no heroics, no unplanned side quests. Every head turned very slowly toward Leaf and Jackson at the same time. Jackson blinked innocently. What? Leaf shrugged. If you're boring, just say that. He didn't hire us, Juno reminded them. He chose us, which means we owe him enough not to waste what he left. That landed. Even Jackson's grin dulled at the reminder. Gabriel adjusted the strap of his pack, eyes on the city. Then let's go finish what he started, he said quietly, and try not to become someone else's cautionary tale while we do it. The road sloped downward, drawing them towards Braxia's open gates and whatever waited in its alleys, its parlors, its secret galleries, and its mask-lit nights. The wind shifted, carrying with it the distant murmur of 1,000 voices, the clatter of carts, and underneath it all, a faint, metallic hum in Gabriel's bones that felt disturbingly like destiny sharpening its teeth.
And that wraps up another episode of the 7 Masks of Malice. I hope you're enjoying the journey and you're excited for what comes next. If you are, of course, don't forget to hit the subscribe, the like, the bell, do the things that help me out. And of course, we'll see you right here, same time, same place, next week.